Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 91 of the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. I've been focusing on adding additional tools to the toolbox of immigration lawyers in the last few months. One aspect you've been hearing a lot about is about litigating in federal court. Another is the need to inform yourselves and your clients about global migration. As a U.S. immigration attorney, it will be great for myself and my business to help every potential client to come to the U.S. But we see that becoming more difficult or expensive, both personally and financially, for many people and companies. As such, it is important to inform clients of other options, which include migration to other countries, at the very least until the situation with the U.S. clears up. Today's interview is with one of the best global migration attorneys in the U.S., Audrey Lustgarten. If you have been involved in global migration, you have definitely heard her name before. I think everyone listening will learn a lot about this very interesting section of the practice of immigration law. Before starting, I want to remind everyone of the YouTube page for this show entitled The Immigration Lawyers Channel. You can find clips and complete episodes and more on that page. Please click the subscribe button to get updates as new material is posted. And with that, let's get it started. Welcome to the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. I am the host, Attorney John Khosravi, and I practice U.S. immigration law exclusively. For more information about the program, please visit www.immigrationlawyerspodcast.com. Please note that this recording is informational only and does not constitute legal advice. Please consult with a licensed attorney for specific legal guidance that suits your case. Also, this recording is copyrighted and written permission is required for rebroadcasting. For more information about me, please visit www.jqqlaw.com. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. I have a wonderful guest who, if you're in the international immigration sphere, you definitely heard of before, Audrey Lustgarten. Audrey, thank you so much for coming on board.
Oh, you're welcome. Happy to be here.
Well, thank you. So why don't you just start with your background, how you got into immigration. Your immigration is different because you do outbound immigration, more like international immigration. But where'd you grow up and what's the path that leads you where you are today?
Yeah, I moved around a lot as a child, which is one of the things that influenced my interest in immigration. My father's from Canada and my mother is American, so we went back and forth a lot and had to deal with some immigration hassles along the way, which I found rather interesting. So circled back to that when I was in law school and took some immigration courses and volunteered also for a nonprofit out in the Los Angeles area where I went to law school and just, yeah, continued to really develop my passion for it. I did practice in corporate litigation for a couple of years right out of law school, but then really kind of my passion for immigration work continued, and I made a move. So started my immigration career with Paul Hastings in Atlanta, and I was with that firm and kind of the successor firms for about 7 or 8 years
No,
altogether
let me pause it right
before
there
starting my own practice.
because we have a lot of
Yeah.
law students who listen to this. And remember when I went to law school, like the goal was to get accepted to Paul Hastings, top 5, 10%. Were you the top of your class at your school?
I was top 10% at UCLA, so
Okay. Oh,
definitely.
perfect. So yeah, Paul Hastings is that's the go-to for UCLA top of your class. So we're going to get to this, but was it what you expected? You probably had on-campus interviews, you got picked up, so you're the cream of the crop. Was it what you expected going to Paul Hastings and that system?
It was interesting. So I will say for the law students out there that I actually got rejected from Paul Hastings the first time
Oh
around.
wow.
So I did corporate litigation at Jones Day first.
Okay, well, that's
I
not
did,
bad.
yeah, I did. So I ended up still at a top firm, but remember very vividly getting rejected from Paul Hastings because Jones Day did not have an immigration department, and Paul Hastings did, and obviously that was an interest of mine. But I got there eventually. I persevered and was able to, lateral over. It was, yeah, pretty much what I expected. It was very intense, very high standards, long hours, all of those wonderful things you hear about big firms.
Okay, so how long did you handle that before you moved on to the next thing?
Well, I was in kind of an odd situation. So I worked for Paul Hastings for a couple of years, and then the economic downturn hit, and they were doing a lot of layoffs. And there were about 100 of us in the immigration department alone, so pretty big practice.
Mm.
And the partners there decided to take all 100 of us and split off, and actually form the Atlanta office of Barry Appelman and Leiden.
Oh, interesting.
which is obviously a boutique immigration
Yeah.
only firm. Yeah.
Okay, so you went to the boutique firm, and what kind of immigration were you handling during this time?
So when I started out, I was handling just the U.S. side immigration, but there was a colleague of mine, a Mexican attorney, who at that time was going to get her LLM. She obviously had her Mexican law degree, but wanted to get
Hmm.
her U.S. LLM, and so had requested to go part time. And she handled the global, the outbound from the U.S. side of things. And when she went part time, they asked me to kind of step in and help with her caseload and give global a try, which I did. And I did both US and global for quite a while. And then just the volume of global requests we were receiving got to be overwhelming. And I moved full time into only doing global work.
Did you miss US base, or was global so much fun that it was okay?
Once in a while, I would miss the, ironic as it sounds nowadays, but the predictability of the US side of kind of, you pretty much know what's going to happen, you know what the laws are, you know what the regs are. And then, on the global side, you're sending someone to Botswana and you don't have the first clue of where to start. So sometimes I would miss kind of the knowing all the answers, or at least knowing where to look for all the answers.
Yeah.
But for the most part, once I started doing global, I just really, really loved it, and I loved the diversity of it, and I loved dealing with, other immigration lawyers from all over the world on a daily basis. That was really probably my favorite part of it, just getting to know all these great immigration lawyers in other countries around the world and getting to work really closely with them to get the visas and the work permits that we needed.
And so you're in Atlanta, and then what happened that you made the switch that inevitably started your own practice?
So I had one more transition before I started my own practice. Actually, after a
Mhm.
couple of years at Barry Appelman, the partners decided that wasn't exactly a match made in heaven, and took the entire group of about 100 again and moved to become the Atlanta office of Fragaman. We all kind of laughed. I mean, we loved the partners we worked for, and it was, a great place to work, very intense and a lot of hours, but a great place to work. But we laughed. They just kept changing the sign on the door every couple of years, and we just kind of went along with it. But the transition to Fragment was interesting. I think I learned a lot in terms of kind of how to work efficiently and how to establish processes and procedures for just about everything. It's incredible, kind of the amount of thought that they put into processes and procedures as compared to most law firms, which don't really focus so much on that, but they have to, just given the volume of
Yeah,
cases that they process.
that's
So it's
really interesting.
interesting.
Let me pick your
Yeah.
brain on that because Fragment is the giant in our business. And
Mhm.
actually, I'm reading a lot of books about business practice and efficiencies, and all that kind of stuff recently. I'm a full solo, and like reading all these books is giving me the bug to maybe expand and input and institute these kind of things and stuff, like having manuals, breaking down roles and all that kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
so you're at Paul Hastings Jones. They didn't have these kind of methods down, or is that because it was different type of law? They couldn't do it the same way.
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, their focus is very much client service, white glove service, whatever the client wants at any hour of day and night. You're just always available, and everything is kind of customized to
Hmm.
every single client, which there's definitely some upsides to that. Like, I think that is some of what some people think is missing at Fragment, because they process such a high volume of cases
Yeah.
and can take a little bit, not going to say in every instance, but can take a little bit more of a cookie cutter approach to things. So
Hmm.
it's really kind of opposites, Paul Hastings versus Fragment. Smart people, hardworking people at both, but a very different way of going about the work. And I think I feel really fortunate that I got to see both. And I feel like I kind of pull elements of both of those systems into my own practice. I don't think it makes sense to reinvent the wheel with every single case. There are some things that are really, you know, conducive to templating, and there's no reason to, draft it up from scratch every single time. And there are tools like questionnaires and checklists and process overviews that can make not only your life easier, but also your client's life
Hmm.
easier. So those things are great, but also not losing the focus on, well, each person is a person. They're an individual, and they're going to have different, levels of understanding of the process and different needs in terms of what they're looking to accomplish. So I think marrying the two of those is
Was
good.
Fragment and a flat rate and Jones Day and Paul Hastings an hourly system?
Well, Jones Day was definitely hourly because that was litigation, corporate litigation.
Hmm.
I think immigration is different. It's just much more cost sensitive,
Hmm.
and clients see it unfortunately as more of a commodity, as
Yeah.
opposed to it's a bet the company $2 billion litigation that I worked on at Jones Day. The company's going to treat that differently than they need 5 work visas for the UK. So yes, Jones Day was hourly. Paul Hastings, and actually, I'm just going to call it the Atlanta office because really those 3 firms
Yeah.
that I worked with, it was the same partners in charge, and so it was run very similarly in some, in terms of billing and things like that. It was a lot of flat fee, even though we had hourly
Hmm.
um, goals that we had to make. That wasn't actually billed to the client. That was more for performance,
Hmm.
internal performance assessment, and most of our work was flat fee. It would just be kind of a rare, compliance type situation that we would bill hourly.
So that's interesting because the flat rate, you got when you're doing volume like that, you got to be vigilant and not waste time. So the fragment system,
Hmm.
the efficiency comes really key to make sure you maximize profits because things can get out of control when you have the
Yep.
kind of numbers and stuff. So
Yep.
then now, what happened next from the switch to big to small? Please continue. It's very interesting.
Yeah. So I felt like I learned a lot from Fragment, but it wasn't quite the right fit for me. And just personally, at that time, I had really little children and just
Hmm.
wanted more kind of flexibility and more work-life balance. So decided to make the transition and start my own practice. And that was in 2014, I guess. It's been
Hmm.
5 years now. Time flies. And started my own practice doing just global work. I made the decision I didn't want to do U.S. and actually kind of saw it as a strategic move to only do global so that I could work with U.S. immigration attorneys, mostly at mid-size or small firms that didn't want to be bothered with global,
Hmm.
but tend to get a lot of calls from their clients looking for global assistance.
Very interesting. And so that was 2014, you said?
Hmm.
Okay, so it's been
Yeah.
5 years. What have been the growing pains? What are the things you didn't expect? Because now you're the owner and manager of a firm. Were there new things that popped up that you never had to deal with? Being a specialist within a company.
I mean, to be honest, kind of because I was in the global department with the firms I was with previously,
Hmm.
it was a much smaller department. There were 100 people in the immigration department, but only maybe half a dozen of us in the global department in Atlanta. So it was kind of like a firm within a firm, and we had a lot of, or I had a lot of responsibility for things that I normally wouldn't have at my level at that size of firm. So
Hmm.
interviewing people, making hiring recommendations, doing reviews, dealing with setting fees, billing clients, a lot of kind of
Good. Okay.
things that partners usually would deal with. But
Hmm.
because of my unique situation doing global, I got a lot of really good experience there that really prepared me, even though I wasn't thinking that way at the time, but really prepared me for running my own firm. Having to deal with clients, with billing, with performance reviews, with managing staff, uh, even having to deal with, identifying local counsel in
Hmm.
different countries. I mean, that's something that I did a lot. Not at Fragment because that was very set and they had their own offices, but
Yeah.
at certainly at Paul Hastings and at Barry Appleman, and that was a daily activity for us. We'd get a request for a new country and have to try to go find local counsel. And so I think I got a lot, maybe if I hadn't had that experience, it would have been more daunting. And I don't know that I would have started my own global firm. It's kind of a unique thing. I don't know of
Yeah.
anyone else who really does only global as a small firm. Mostly it's you just find it at the really large firms like the Fragments and the Barry Applemans of the world.
After learning more about you, if I had to restart it, it'd be a fun thing to do global because it's international. You meet so many different people. It's like exciting thinking about it. But could you talk about the models there are for someone who does global immigration, how it's done? I mean, it's
Hmm.
fascinating. It's like how does that even work out? What is a global practice like that the way you have it?
Yeah, so there's kind of in the industry, three different models. People have different names for them, but the basic idea is kind of how involved you as a U.S. attorney want to be, need to be in global cases. So the first model is kind of the referral or the handoff model where you get a call from a client, they need help sending someone to South Africa. You basically connect them with your preferred South African counsel, and the local counsel handles it. You might do some sort of consolidated billing if it's a regular client of yours that you're billing every month anyways. They might prefer that as opposed to getting invoices from different lawyers around the world. But in that model, the U.S. attorney is not really closely involved in the day-to-day of the case.
Hmm.
The other extreme is kind of the high touch model where the U.S. attorney handles pretty much everything and the client is never in contact with local counsel. Although, of course, to avoid unauthorized practice of law, you would still want to have local counsel engaged behind the scenes.
Hmm.
Obviously, not recommended for U.S. attorneys to run around the world filing applications
Yeah.
in other countries. But everything is very, very closely controlled. The client may or may not even be aware of local counsel's involvement. And the kind of in between of those two is something called the hybrid model, where you as the U.S. attorney stay involved, but local counsel is also involved in direct contact with the client. Depending on what stage of the process you're in, like with the U.S., in other countries that can have various stages in the process. So your in-country work permit filing would be similar to like filing with USCIS, and then you need to get a visa stamp, and then you need to do a residence registration. So depending on the stage and the type of work that needs to be done, U.S. counsel or local counsel might, take more of a leading role, but both are closely involved in the hybrid model.
And so a key part of what you do is having these relationships with foreign attorneys. How do you develop that, and more importantly, how do you trust that they're going to be reliable? It's kind of like you're hiring an employee to a certain extent, and you're putting
Mm-hmm.
your reputation on the line for this. You've done it for a lot of years, so you've had time to develop these relationships and stuff. But how do you do that? And I'm assuming your membership in AILA and in the global committee, everything helps a lot to develop personal relationships like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did definitely come into having my own firm with the advantage of having practiced for many years with the large firms and similarly being tasked with finding
Hmm.
foreign counsel in other countries. I mean, it is really having a global practice is all about establishing and maintaining those global relationships. Like you're having a competent, reliable local counsel will make your life so much easier. And on the flip side, if you have someone that's not as responsive as you need them to be, it can just be absolutely
Hmm.
miserable to not be able to get the client what they need. So it's just critical. I have kind of developed that over the years through my involvement with AILA has been crucial. I mean, we have an amazing network with the AILA Global Migration section of attorneys from all over the world. We have about 850 members right now, and that's combined U.S. and foreign attorneys. But we have, I think, the greatest international coverage we've had to date. It just keeps expanding and
Hmm.
expanding as more and more people find out about the global migration section and what a great resource it is to connect with attorneys from other countries, because it's not just U.S. even U.S. lawyers needing to connect with local counsel in Italy or China or Australia. It's also, third countries, so my Australian counsel might need to find someone to refer to in Switzerland.
Hmm.
So it's a fantastic, actually really close knit group of folks who work together and who share knowledge and who are really passionate about the practice of immigration law.
Very interesting. And uh, what type of clients usually need this kind of services? Is it family, like personal, individual, or corporate stuff, or what kind of people search for you?
Yeah, so we do exclusively employment-based immigration. We cover 54 countries around the world now, and it's just too much to try to do both employment and family. I
Yeah.
just will not fit in my brain. And at the same time, I think that we can add the most value when it is employment-based, because we'll have, we primarily represent U.S. and Canadian companies that are sending people from the U.S. to other countries around the world.
Hmm.
And I think that we can add a lot of value there because we can offer kind of a single point of contact. They're their HR managers in the U.S. They want to pick up the phone and call me in the same time zone and figure out what they need to do to get their employee to China and Australia and Japan. So I feel like we bring value there in kind of knowing the basics of the process, knowing the questions to ask, being able to give them general information, and then connecting with local counsel kind of behind the scenes if they decide to go forward with a work permit or a visa application. With family-based, it's usually a one-off. I got a query earlier today as somebody's son wants to get a Polish passport based on citizenship by descent. Well, that person isn't going to need to send, most likely, isn't going to need to also get, a passport in Italy and Australia and Japan. They just have a single country need, very specific. And I feel that those folks are usually best served by just connecting directly with Polish counsel, which is what I did in this case.
And what you do too is also then non-immigrant visa categories, not the immigrant and there's a citizenship and stuff like that.
Yeah, we don't usually get involved in the citizenship. I mean, once in a blue moon, if there's a client, an established client, and they are transferring someone, say, to Australia, and they know they're going to be there for a really long time. Well, after we get the non-immigrant visa, we may be able to assist them with transitioning to the long-term residence and to citizenship eventually. But generally speaking, no, that's not something we really promote or advertise. Is that we're going to help you with permanent residence or citizenship. The vast majority of our work are those non-immigrant employment-based visas where people are going on assignments for a short period of time and then returning to their home country.
Now, with the rise of global nationalism, you see that in the U.S. and the things we have to deal with Department of State and USCIS. In some parts of Europe, it's the same. What is your impression internationally of the changes that are happening with the political turmoil that's happening globally? Has there been shifts that you've noticed?
Yeah, it's interesting. We actually, just a little plug for the AILA Global Migration section, we actually did a teleconference on that topic yesterday.
Oh, wow.
That is recorded and will be available fairly soon, but looking at kind of how different countries are dealing with this. And, we see some countries that are, I wouldn't say mirroring what the U.S. is doing, but definitely that are being influenced by those same kind of sentiments. The UK with Brexit is an obvious example. That's just been a disaster. Australia doesn't get as much press for it, but they have, when it comes to immigration, a conservative government in power that has been continually tightening access to both non-immigrant and immigrant classifications. The governments in Hungary and Czech Republic have also gotten a fair share of bad press for their treatment of immigrants. So there are definitely countries like that. But then on the flip side, there are countries that kind of see it as an opportunity that, well, if those countries are going to have nationalist tendencies and be making immigration more difficult, these countries are going to be open for business and they're going to pick up all the talent that isn't able to get into the US or the UK or Australia or wherever it may be. Canada is a really prominent example of this. They are open for business. They want the best and brightest immigrants to come there, and they are working hard to make the process more streamlined and easier. Likewise, Ireland is picking up a lot of companies and employees that may otherwise have gone to the UK, but the companies don't want to deal with the uncertainty of what's going on there right now. And another good example would be the Netherlands. I think they're also benefiting from the Brexit debacle, and they're very much open for business. They've got categories that make it quite easy to get highly qualified employees work visas in a pretty short amount of time.
So this is Thursday right now, we're recording this. What have been some technical stuff that's been on your plate that keep you busy in your practice, like any particular case or country that has some issues that have, fill up your time?
There's always a variety of issues bubbling up. The UK has definitely been a source of frustration this week.
Have the changes happened with the UK yet, or is it constantly talk about changes happening?
It's constantly talking about changes happening, and they keep postponing it. Now, I think the next deadline that they've imposed is October. and who knows what's going to happen then. But in the interim, all the other EU countries are kind of coming up with a contingency plan for a hard Brexit where, okay, well, what are we going to do with British citizens, for example, living in
Yeah.
Spain if a hard Brexit, a no-deal Brexit happens? So each government is kind of developing their contingency plan for what on earth to do with the British people living there when this does eventually happen, assuming that it does. But with the UK right this week in my work, the frustration is more about their outsourcing provider. It's more of technical challenges as opposed to legal challenges. And this is actually a trend that a lot of countries are following, is that they are outsourcing their visa services to third parties. One of those is VFS Global, which seems to just be taking over. And it does lead to some challenges in
Is
terms of.
this a thing? I think I read that England is not the government, or like their USCIS isn't handling immigration. They have a company as third party that's actually, that's crazy.
Yes, it's crazy. I mean, they're not supposed to actually be making the decisions, but they are definitely the front line in terms of if you need to file an application, you've got to deal with them. And to be honest, I used to be kind of excited when countries would outsource, because then it's a private party. They want to make money. They're going to pick up the phone. They're going to be responsive at least. And that's not the case anymore. I would say 5 years ago that was the case, and now we just groan when we see another country outsourcing, because it's just become a bit of a nightmare, as
That's so
dealing with
interesting.
USCIS is.
Yeah.
But it's a private party, and it definitely brings some challenges.
The U.S. does this too. Like the National Visa Center is mostly contractors that do it, and
Yep.
that's when a lot of big problems happen, when the contractors aren't paying attention. And
Yes.
embassies have like local people that they bring on board and make this pretty much make decisions sometimes, or mistreat people, and so you see these problems. There's nothing you can do about it, especially when it's that detached, where it's like the face of the government, but a private party is doing it. To a
Yep.
certain extent, at least Bryn's saying there's a third party doing it, and so you have someone to blame. But it was a government function like that they have a monopoly over. It's a risky move to hand it over to a third party. So sheesh. That's
It is. It is. It's really frustrating. Although sometimes it's most challenging when you're dealing with a country that has high volume. Because there's just no way to kind of get past that bureaucracy, or no easy way. I mean, we do have some contacts directly with the consulate, but we like to use those really sparingly and not for something stupid like the money order amount was incorrect on the VFS website. We save those for high profile emergencies before I'm going to call a consulate, the UK consulate. But sometimes with the smaller countries, you can actually get beyond the outsourced agency, which is really nice. We love dealing with the smaller countries that are not so busy and not so overwhelmed, and you can actually pick up the phone and talk to a consular officer and sort out the issue. It's really nice and refreshing to be able to do that.
Interesting. So now you're headquartered in Michigan. You have your own firm. You have family you're raising, and it's a solo to small firm situation that you have. How's that? What are their plans of growth, or is the setup you have able to handle what is a firm that deals with large companies on an international basis? There's a lot going on that you get lost in. How are you handling that? Any plans for the future to deal with that?
Yeah, it's definitely hectic, and I have some big firm habits die hard in terms of just being really responsive to emails and possibly taking on more work than I should occasionally, and staying late to finish it. But I mean, I do have a really great little team here. I've got an associate attorney and a few paralegals that work with me here in the office that are really wonderful. Keep them well caffeinated and working hard. But we're really fortunate in Global that we can leverage a lot of our local counsel and their staff to deal with kind of fluctuations in volume. So although we're a small team and we are really the face to the client in terms of providing guidance and making sure that everything is going just right, a lot of the more tedious, time-intensive work of filling out applications in a language other than English, and going down to the immigration office and standing in line for a couple of hours and things like that fall to our local counsel. So that's really nice that we can leverage their staff to help us get things done when we are really busy. But I do definitely have plans for growth. I would like to expand the firm a little bit more because I think it does make it easier to handle those kind of fluctuations
Hmm.
in volume. And I definitely believe in work-life balance, not just for myself, but very much for my team as well. I want it to be a really fun, positive place to work. And something that people enjoy coming into the office. It's not drudgery and it's not loading anyone down with too much work. So yeah, plans to grow. Never want to be a giant, Barry Appleman or Fragman size, but within our little office here in Michigan, it'd be nice to get a few more people.
Interesting. Now, I'm going back to something I kind of bring up a lot, but in developing these relationships with other attorneys and firms internationally, I've tried to do that because I have certain countries I deal with a lot, and some outbound
Mm-hmm.
stuff would come, and I would try to create relationships with them. But I found it's really difficult just having those attorneys follow up, even though it's a profitable relationship where I'll just essentially be sending them clients. Do you notice that
Mm-hmm.
as well? Is it hard finding people that even when you have something ready to go, a cooked meal, and say, "Here you go, just eat it," like have you had that? Have you seen that before where they're like, it's
Oh,
a golden
absolutely.
opportunity? Okay, so it's not just me.
No, don't take it personally, John.
Yeah.
Um, no, it is. And I mean, I think depending on the country that you are dealing with, some of it can be cultural. Americans are very direct. I never, I answer the phone and, if it's an American attorney calling me, a lot of times they'll barely get a hello out before I have someone that needs to go here. They need this, they need that, they need it by
Hmm.
this date. And of course, I'm like, I'm half American, so I deal with that and it's totally fine and I'm not offended. But if you take that approach with, if I'm getting a call from my Swiss counsel, it's, 10 minutes of how are you? What's going on with you? What's your practice? And it's much more about the interpersonal relationship
Hmm.
that you have. Even in emails, they'll almost always with other countries be, some back and forth and kind of chit chat and developing and maintaining the relationship. So I think part of it is cultural, where they almost feel that it's a little rude to be too
Hmm.
direct, I guess. And I've
Yeah.
actually had GMS members from abroad ask me about this. It's like, this seems odd. Is this normal? And I'm like, oh, it's perfectly normal. It's just how Americans are. They're not upset. This is just, they want this and they want it now. So some of it can be, it's not that they're not um, willing or not eager to take on work, but just kind of the style in which they work. But it can also very much be that you can come to somebody and say, I want you to be my local counsel. I have all this work to refer to you, and there's just not necessarily the same level of drive or interest as you might see among a
Hmm.
typical U.S. immigration attorney. It's more I've had success where I've been able to kind of develop the relationships more slowly, and then when you do have the work, people are more eager to help. But it's definitely different. It's interesting.
Yeah, immigration is so interesting. Every aspect of it, interpersonal relationships, either with the client or with companies, will be the HR, for example, or foreign firms in your case. Having personal
Hmm.
relationships is just, if you go to immigration court, even knowing the judge, knowing the ICE counsel, knowing the
Yep.
clerks, it's just a personal area of law. Even if you're not that good at the law, if
Hmm.
you know people and you have good relationships, they'll solve a lot of things. If I go to a USCIS
Yeah.
interview and I get along with the officer, potentially they'll be less strict on my clients even. So,
Hmm.
or even though the security guards will let you in faster or let you cut even, or something, just this little personal stuff. You got to have a good
Yeah.
personality and be able to talk with people to be able to be succeed in this field. There's no way around it. Unless
Hmm.
you're, a technician sits in the office all day and just fills out
Yeah.
forms. But
Yeah.
being a lawyer is more than that. I think just being able to talk with people is a major part of being a lawyer.
Oh, absolutely. And being able to, in immigration, whether you're doing inbound US or
Yeah,
outbound, either way, you've got to kind of have some cultural competence and
yeah,
be able to bridge those cultural divides. And that's, something I always have to talk to my staff about here because we are located in Michigan. We don't
mhm,
have that much diversity where we're located. And I get great people, but literally that's part of my training is like, okay, this country, they do this way. This country, they do it that way. Like, it's just being mindful of that. And even if you're not familiar with the particular culture you're dealing with, just being attuned to, okay, they might do this differently or they might understand this differently. Let me, pay attention and see how it's going, is really important, I think,
Yeah, just
to
what
success.
yeah, what you said a term right there. Like when I go to law schools, they always ask me, I don't speak a second language. Could I succeed in immigration? I'm like, it's not about language fluency, it's about cultural fluency. Is this foreign
Yep.
person going to be comfortable talking with you? Because Americans are so upfront and stuff. Sometimes foreigners won't
Mhm.
share information when they're on the inbound side because they're like either
Yeah.
get offended or they don't know how to deal with this American who's talking like this. Some of them like it because they're like, oh, it's a cowboy kind of stuff and they see movies, but at the same time, it's like that's why they go to their own, native or same culture kind of practitioners because they're kind of afraid. And so it's not
Yep,
that you need
they're
to know their
comfortable there.
language, yeah, but you got to be
Mhm.
able to make them comfortable. Say, I'm a person, and I have a Iranian background, so if you talk to an Iranian person from Iran or something like that or Persian, it takes them like when I get calls from Iran, for example, it takes 10 minutes of pleasantries until we get down to what we need to talk about. And
Yep.
when you're in America and time is money, it's just extremely frustrating. So actually, if people call me from Iran, my phone shows the Iran number. I don't even pick up anymore because I can't handle going 10 minutes of, I hope you're doing good. Thank you
Right.
so much. God bless you. I hope the family's good.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, just get to business. And I kind of American it up a little bit when I'm even speaking Farsi to them. So they know, like, if I'm not being rude, that I'm trying to prove it wrong. I'm an American personality, so they don't get offended.
Yeah.
But you got
Yeah.
to deal with that. So it's just part of it. You got to include that in your flat fee. That you're going to be
Oh,
talking
definitely.
nice
No,
to
you have to
them.
have to factor that in. But on the flip side of that, I think it can take, whether it's local counsel or it's the client, a while to kind of warm up and to be comfortable and to have that relationship. But I think also once you have that relationship, people are willing to really go to great lengths to help you
Mhm.
out when you need it. I mean, I had a bunch of cases in Colombia recently, and I have a great relationship with my local counsel there, and met him in person several times at AILA conferences and talked to him about all sorts of things. And, I had these really difficult cases, and, they were coming in, and it was a Colombian holiday the day before they were supposed to come in, and just all these things were going on and not entirely going according to plan because of lapses on the company side and just general chaos. And it's like, they came in and they worked on it on the holiday, and then the day after a holiday, it was like they had to go to the 7 o'clock in the morning appointment. I mean, they just went above and beyond. I didn't even ask them to do that. It was just kind of, here are the facts. What do you think we should do? And they're like, no problem. We can handle this. We'll help. We'll do it. We'll be there at 7 o'clock in the morning. We'll make sure everything's handled. So that's really heartwarming, kind of, when you see that and you've worked on the relationship. And of course, we're willing to reciprocate and we try to make things as easy as possible. But it's so much nicer to work with someone when you do have that kind of relationship and they're just willing to go the extra mile.
Yeah, I have to really commend your work because we're talking about it as a business and the law, but
Hmm.
international immigration is the greatest thing for our civilization to be able to unite and have people go and get familiar with other cultures, live in different places, and easing the way
Hmm.
of doing that. It's much bigger than you probably will ever know what effect you've had in global interaction and cultures and people coming together. Hopefully, not for the better, not for the worse. Some people going in, but it's what we do is really above what we can see in our generation. Like, you'll have some person who you send over to Italy to live, and they have a kid there that grows up in Italy, and then eventually comes back and brings some sort of thing from Italy as a business here or some form of culture. It's a Immigration lawyers really play a big role in development of society as it's created right now in
Hmm.
the movement of people. So it's an incredible position to be in, even when you get caught up in the day to day of it, of dealing with bureaucracy and stuff.
Hmm.
It's so satisfying to there's an inkling subconsciously what you're doing is really helping the world come together. It's a beautiful position to be in.
Yeah, you don't just have to think about it, I don't think, too often, but
Mhm.
it's so true. I mean, when you see these kind of the rise of nationalism and things like that, and it's like so many people that you talk to that have those really strong feelings, it's like, okay, well, have you ever been anywhere else? Have you ever known people from other places? And I feel like people that have traveled, who have lived in other countries, or who have known foreigners here are much more likely to be accepting of people that are different from them, and to see the positives of that and the really rich cultural experience that you can have. So it's, yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
And even if they seem different, they know that they're not really at the end of the day different than human beings. They have some superficial and a little deeper stuff. At the end of the day, they're people just like us because you live in that society. You know, they're just dealing with the same stuff, trying to get make money, take care of their family, and have a little fun while it's
Mhm.
all happening. But they just do their fun a little bit differently. It might be by eating a certain kind of food or making certain kinds of
Yep.
jokes that are different. But it's such a fascinating thing to do. So I'm like, I want to go into global migration. I got the bug. So thank you so much. If people
Oh.
wanted to reach out and to talk with you, get to know more about you, and would they do that?
Yeah, I'm always happy to. I'm kind of in my role as chair of the global migration section. I really love talking to people that are thinking about getting into the field or who are new to the field or just have questions. So yeah, they can feel free to reach out. Email is usually the best way to reach me, which is Audrey at lustgartenglobal.com.
Hmm.
That's usually the easiest way to get to me.
And I'll have the info in the show notes for your website and stuff. And Lustgarten was a T, right?
Great.
Lustgarten.
It is.
It is, yeah.
Yep, Lustgarten, married into a German last name.
Wonderful. Audrey, thank you so much for coming to speak with us.
Oh, thank you.
Have a good one.
You too.